But with the book of Genesis, where does it come from? Like, we have this idea, I know people who aren't Christians will say it was written in the 4th or 5th century BC or BCE. And so when you look at the authorship and kind of like where this book comes from, where do you see the origins of Genesis?
Okay, well, I would agree with a big asterisk that it was written during the Babylonian exile. It definitely was. I mean, that's when the Jews started using the Chaldean alphabet, so there had to be some sort of process there. My basic view is that Genesis, the first early recognizable form of Genesis, would have come about during the monarchy period. Maybe Solomon, David time, maybe a little bit after, sometime around then. It's updated a little bit later. It's updated some more, especially during the Babylonian exile, and that's when we get the form of Genesis that we have now. So the most early recognizable form would have happened during early Iron Age, I would say. They didn't write it in a vacuum. I would say they relied on other earlier sources. Like, I think they took the Table of Nations, which already existed, and put it in Genesis at that point. They would have used an earlier flood account. There would have been an early Adamic account that they would have incorporated into there. I'm not taking a documentary hypothesis, but something like that. You get like an early form around the time of Solomon, perhaps, maybe a little bit later, and then it gets updated around the time of the exile. Now, I don't think that's much of an issue for me. Like, Genesis 11 says that Abraham left from Ur of the Chaldeans. All right, Chaldeans probably weren't reigning in that region until much later. A later author during the exile probably would have put that reference in for later biblical usage. That's not a big deal to me. If you want a comparison, in Egypt, there's a work called the Tale of Senuha. And we have found an early version from the Middle Kingdom and a later version from the 13th century. In the 13th century version, Kedem is updated to have to Kadesh. So the earlier name of the city is now changed to Kadesh. They update language. Like, they don't use the old Egyptian word for sea, they update it with a Semitic loan word, yam. So it was common that text would be updated over time. We see this in Egypt, and I think that's what happened with Genesis. Basically, during the time of the monarchy, they started to put their history together. You get an early form of Genesis. It's then updated for later audiences, especially during the exile, and then you get basically a standard form of what we have today. And of course, you have forms of Genesis updated later into the Septuagint. There's the Samaritan Pentateuch, that kind of thing. So that's my basic view of Genesis. It's a process of getting it out. It wasn't always just written at one time, stamped with a seal of approval, and sent out, kind of thing. It was a text that was updated over time. But it was just trying to get the history of Israel out there so that the people would be able to have it and use it if they needed it.
So how does this view of Genesis impact kind of like ideas such as like the inspiration or the inerrancy of Scripture? Because I know you bring up, I believe you said Genesis 13 with Abraham, with this location that probably wouldn't have occurred. I believe what you said is during the time that Abraham would have lived. So how do you see Genesis in light of like traditional Christian ideas such as the inspiration or inerrancy of Scriptures?
Well, I mean, I don't see why God couldn't be in that process. I did a video back in April called Who Wrote the Bible? Cultural Context of the Biblical World. And I explained, these texts could be written up over time. That was not so much a problem because God could be in the process as well. Why couldn't God allow that kind of thing? So basically, Michael Heiser uses something called the holy stapler analogy. And take a prophet like Isaiah or Zechariah, Ezekiel. You have disciples that follow him, may write down notes of things he said. All of a sudden, he dies. Okay, well, now you got all this work of stuff he done. Do you just put it all together and take a holy stapler and go, there you go? No, you get a good scribe who can go through his work, make it cohesive, make it work together, put things left and right. An analogy you can see with the book of Jeremiah. In the Septuagint version of Jeremiah, it's 1/7 shorter than what you get in the Masoretic version. So what the argument is that when the book of Jeremiah was taken into exile with the people in Babylon, a tradent would have gone with it, and he would have updated it into the Chaldean alphabet. He would have added some additional commentary, reorganized some things to help explain what Jeremiah was trying to get at. I don't see why God could not have been in that process of getting Scripture out so that people could better understand it.